This fantasy football season has been absolutely brutal. Like, it's been so bad. These injuries have been so tough. I feel like every single week a new star is going down. We just lost Tucker Kraft. Jaden Daniels could be done for the year. It just hasn't stopped. The injuries, the disappointment. It's been a really crazy year, and it's been really hard to watch at times. But we're here to keep our head up, keep our chin up. There's still a lot of football to be played. There's still a lot of things that can happen. Your team isn't toast yet. And there's still plenty of guys on the waiver wire who are going to contribute in fantasy football. And the waiver wire has never been more important than it is right now because of all the injuries. So in this video, we are talking about 10 plus players that you need to add before week 10 of fantasy football. Let's start with my number one pickup of the week, and it's Colston Loveland, the rookie tight end for the Chicago Bears. We actually had Loveland on a stash video a couple weeks ago. We've all been waiting for that big breakout, and it finally happened in week 9. 6 receptions, 118 yards, 2 touchdowns, 7 targets, 29.8 fantasy points. He had a 75% route participation. And even before Cole Kmet got injured in this one, it was already kind of trending in Loveland's favor in terms of route participation, as he was running 64% of the routes compared to Kmet's 21%. So it's clear, it's obvious the Bears want to get Loveland more involved. He's a really talented rookie, 21-year-old that the Bears spent the 10th overall pick on that we just talked about. Why would they not see what they have in this player? They're not going to play a guy like Cole Kmet over him for that much longer because it's very apparent who is the better player at this point. I think Loveland is dripping in talent, in potential. He is 6'6", 240 pounds. He's like a big receiver at this point. Natural hands, strong route runner. Chicago is going to utilize him. Whether Kmet is healthy or not, I really don't think it's going to matter. And while the Chicago offense is very frustrating at times, one week they look great, the other week they look terrible. A lot of that has to deal with Caleb Williams because Caleb, most of this season so far, has not looked good. But this past week against the Bengals, he was scorching hot. I want guys on this Ben Johnson-led team because we know how creative, how innovative of a play caller he is. And let's not forget, Ben Johnson was a big reason why Sam Laporta was a tight end 1 overall in fantasy 2 years ago. Not saying that that's what Loveland's going to be the rest of the year, but I do think he's going to be very fantasy relevant. If you lost Tucker Kraft on Sunday, I think Colston is a really nice replacement. I would be aggressive getting him on your team. All right, moving on to our next guy, Parker Washington, who at this point is looking like he could be Jacksonville's wide receiver 1 for the rest of the year, potentially. Travis Hunter on IR, looking like he has a good shot to not return this season. And then Brian Thomas Jr., like, man, I have Thomas in a league, and it's just been so depressing. He's having one of the worst sophomore seasons in recent memory for me. On top of getting injured all the time. First, he had a hand injury. You were kind of giving him some grace with the drops because he was dealing with a hand injury, but that seems like that went away. And then he had a shoulder injury. And then last week, he suffered what looked like a high ankle sprain as a guy kind of rolled up on him after Thomas made a fantastic catch and run play, even though I don't know why he didn't start running to the outside. He might have scored, but it's just been that type of year. Brian Thomas has done next to nothing, and he's always injured. He looks like not the same player that we saw his rookie year. So if you drafted him, you are really disappointed. You probably don't even care if he's out there or not because he's done nothing. But Washington is coming off a nice game, a receiver that can produce in this offense. 8 receptions, 90 yards on 9 targets, 17 fantasy points, 26.4% target share. Parker is essentially playing the Travis Hunter role, the role that we thought Hunter was going to kind of explode in. It's the slot role in a Liam Cohen offense, which holds a lot of power, holds a lot of value if you play that role. We saw Chris Godwin, Cooper Kupp, both eat in this similar role years ago. Now, obviously, Parker Washington is not of the Chris Godwin or the Cooper Kupp caliber, but it just tells you the value of this role in this offense. Trevor Lawrence is going to throw to Washington out of the slot early and often, and we saw it in this one. 8 receptions. Like, I think Washington is a quality receiver that's going to see a massive workload moving forward with no Hunter, likely no Brian Thomas Jr. If you need a spot start, if you need a quality wide receiver, that could have long-term value, I would want Parker on my team. I think he's a very strong add off the waiver wire this week. All right, moving on to our next guy, Tez Johnson, the rookie receiver for the Tampa Bay Bucks. Johnson is only rostered in 35% of Yahoo leagues, which is pretty shocking to me considering he's likely going to be the number 2 target in this passing game behind Emeka Egbuka for potentially the rest of the year. Mike Evans, broken collarbone, likely done for the fantasy season. Maybe he makes a late push towards maybe the last game, maybe in the playoffs. And Chris Godwin just re-injured his ankle that he's coming off major surgery on. I don't see a world where he comes back for a long time. He might also be done for the fantasy season. So you're getting a guy in Johnson who is going to see a ton of work in a good Tampa Bay offense attached to Baker Mayfield, where Emeka Egbuka is going to be taking a lot of the defensive attention. I think Tez has a really strong second half of the year, and he's already showed us his explosiveness, his big play-making ability, and in Week 8, another nice game. 5 receptions, 43 yards, 6 targets, 9.3 fantasy points, along with a 96% route participation. Obviously not a huge fantasy day. Baker Mayfield also kind of struggled in this one, but still nice usage. He's on the field all the time. He scored double-digit fantasy points in 3 out of his last 4 games, along with 2 touchdowns over that span. This is another situation where you're betting on a talented player, on a good offense, attached to a good quarterback that's never going to leave the football field. Like, why would you not want Johnson on your team? I think he's an underrated rookie that's going to have a huge second half of the year. I would be aggressive getting Tez on your team if you need a receiver or if you need a high upside guy who could really explode towards the back half of the season. All right, moving on to our next guy, Torrey Horton. Talk about another young, explosive rookie who's been really fun this year, who shined in his limited opportunities. And with Cooper Kupp out in Week 9, Horton took advantage yet again. 4 receptions, 48 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 targets, 20.8 fantasy points. Obviously, you'd like to see more volume, more targets, but Seattle was up big early. They didn't really need to do much to beat Washington, but Horton has shown nice upside even before his strong performance on Sunday night. We all remember that 95-yard punt return that he took to the house in Week 3. He clearly deserves more playing time on this Seattle offense that is cooking right now. Sam Darnold is playing the best football of his career right now. It's pretty fun to watch. Clint Kubiak is a brilliant offensive coordinator, and with Cooper Kupp, 32 years old, dealing with a hamstring injury. We know the injury history, the age of Kupp. I wouldn't be surprised if he's out for weeks, which could carve out a role for Horton, who just might be the better player at this point. I think he's going to have a big role on this offense moving forward, whether Kupp eventually returns from injury or not. It could take Kupp a long time to heal. Usually at that age, a hamstring injury is not great. We've seen it with Mike Evans, and we know Jackson Smith-Njigba is the alpha dog in this offense, looking like the best wide receiver in football right now, maybe outside of Jamar Chase. Like, he has been absolutely incredible, but I don't think Horton is a slouch either. I think he's a really talented player who did fall to the 5th round of the NFL draft only because he got hurt in his final season in college. But in 2023, Torrey had 96 receptions for over 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. And this is a freak athlete who scored a 9.83 relative athletic score at the combine, which ranks 66 out of 3,816 receivers from 1987 to 2025. This is a really explosive, fun player who could very well be a league winner down the stretch of the fantasy football season. And offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak said probably about a month ago that Horton reminds him of Justin Jefferson his rookie year. That's obviously high praise for any player. I think Horton, regardless, needs to be added in all formats. I think he could have a big impact the second half of the year. All right, moving on to our next guy, Jayden Reed, who we know has been out since Week 2 after suffering a broken collarbone. He also had a Jones fracture in his left foot. He's been out for weeks. We don't really know when he's going to return. But if you're sitting pretty right now, you have a winning record, you have a bench spot, you have an IR spot, I would be adding Reed because we know Green Bay just lost star tight end Tucker Kraft, who was really looking like their wide receiver 1. So this receiver room is wide open. And I think that Jayden Reed, Christian Watson are the 2 most talented players in that group. Matthew Golden probably is up there as well, but he's also banged up, so we don't really know his status. And I think Reed is going to have a significant role in this offense once he is fully healthy. They need more playmakers in the passing game with no Tucker Kraft. And last year, Reed played really good football, even though he didn't have huge numbers. He had the highest passer rating when targeted among all receivers, 3rd in yards per target, 7th in yards per reception, 19th in yards per route run, and led Green Bay in receptions and yards the last 2 seasons. Again, if you have a winning record, if you're in a good spot, I would be stashing Reed on your bench, on your IR spot for the home stretch, because I really do think once he's healthy, he's going to make a big impact. All right, moving on to our next guy, Devin Singletary. Everyone last week spent all their fab, their number 1 waiver priority, to get Tyrone Tracy on their team, you know, with, as we all remember, with Cam Scatterboot out for the year. But of course, Devin Singletary out of nowhere was the lead dog in this Giants backfield in week 9, and honestly looked like the better player, even though Tracy probably is more talented at this point. But Singletary rushed for 43 yards on only 8 carries, 5.4 yards per carry, 7.1 fantasy points. Obviously not a huge fantasy day, but this is more about the usage. Singletary had 55% of the snaps, 47% of the rush attempts, compared to Tracy, who only had 5 rush attempts for 18 yards and saw 45% of the snaps. He did get banged up, I believe, in the second half of this game. He did return. Maybe that had something to do with it. I'm not really sure, but Singletary also played all 7 snaps in the red zone on 3 different drives in week 9, which should solidify him as the Giants' red zone back. Here's what I'll say. Singletary, not a bad player, not a great player either. He looks like he might be the preferred guy in this backfield for the Giants moving forward, and he could have a substantial role on this offense with some fantasy value. But the other side of the token is this is a messy running back by committee. It's a 50-50 split in most games on a below average Giants offense at this point, which makes Singletary a less exciting option moving forward. If you're really desperate at running back, Singletary is obviously worth an add, but I would just don't go crazy with your fab here, because it could be a really messy situation, and Singletary is a very average player at this point. Let's move on to some other strong ads. These first couple names are all in reference to what's going to happen at the trade deadline. If David Njoku, tight end for the Browns, gets traded, if Harold Fannin is somehow available on your waiver wire, he needs to be picked up. If the Browns trade Jerome forward to, let's say, the Kansas City Chiefs, then he could have a massive role. I like Michael Mayer potentially for the Raiders, tight end, getting traded away. Maybe the Packers trade for him. And Isaiah Davis, if Breece Hall for the Jets gets traded away. Those are 4 guys that I would be adding, stashing on my bench, because we don't really know how the trade deadline is going to go today. It should be interesting. Maybe some great things happen. Maybe nothing happens. But these are guys that I would want on my team just in case. And then some other nice names. Alec Pierce, coming off a strong game in week 9. I think he's going to be pretty inconsistent overall for fantasy purposes, but doesn't hurt to add him. We're at the point of the fantasy season where you want to be stashing the backup running backs, because if the starter gets hurt, these guys could be league winners. Blake Corum, Brian Robinson Jr., Tank Bigsby, Dylan Sampson. Those 2 or more if Saquon Barkley and Quinshon Judkins don't play in week 10. It looks like Judkins is going to play, but you can still add Sampson just in case. Christian Watson, who we've talked about, Packers receiver, kind of the same thing with Jaden Reed, Watson, with no Tucker Kraft. Both guys are going to be heavily utilized in that Packers offense. Luke Musgrave, tight end for the Packers. I don't love Musgrave. I don't think he's going to really fill the void of Tucker Kraft, but if you need a tight end, he is worth an add. And then lastly, JJ McCarthy, who looked really good in his first game back from injury, if you need a quarterback. That's all I have for you guys today. I really appreciate each and every one of you watching the video. If you enjoyed the video, if you enjoy what we're doing here, consider leaving a like, subscribe to the channel, comment down below, and I'll see you in the next one.